Well, howdy, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. So excited to have you joining me for another round. Once again, I'm Lauren Muzyka, attorney and human rights advocate, and I serve as president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest peaceful sidewalk outreach organization. Today, I'm going to cut to the chase and tell you I am so excited to have with us in the hot seat, Steve Karlen of 40 Days for Life. But this conversation may not be exactly what you would expect. Before I explain, for those that aren't acquainted with Steve's organization, 40 Days for Life is the global movement of prayer to end abortion, hosting 40-day prayer vigils every spring and fall in front of abortion-related facilities. And they even have available now a 365-day prayer program. And this incredible witness has saved thousands of lives, helped numerous eternal souls leave the abortion industry, and aided the closure of dozens and dozens of abortion facilities. And the best part is that no one did it through ugliness or force, but through the power of prayer and love. Again, what a witness. But I want to talk today about what happens when we do our best and we don't seemingly save any babies. If you've been doing this long enough, we all have days on the sidewalk like that. Even those of us on the Sidewalk Advocates for Life national team or the 40 Days for Life national team, right? How do you stay encouraged in the midst of that? How do you watch dozens and dozens of women walk into these facilities there to end the life of their child and just let it go when it's time to go home? How do you get yourself into God's promise of that peace that's supposed to surpass all understanding? Years ago, I was greatly moved when Steve wrote an article about this very thing. It's actually something that still inspires me today. So I wanted to have him on the show. That's what we're here to chat about. So let me go ahead and introduce our special guest. Steve Karlen got involved in the pro-life movement as a volunteer leader with the 40 Days for Life campaign in Madison, Wisconsin. Before long, he found himself at the center of a nationwide controversy as the health system at his alma mater, the University of Wisconsin, was secretly preparing to open a late-term abortion center on campus. Groups across the state looked to Steve for leadership. After nearly a year and a half, the University of Wisconsin Hospital and Clinics abandoned its plan to open an abortion facility, citing Steve and his team as the reason for the decision. Steve serves as the campaign director for 40 Days for Life National, where he trains and assists local 40 Days for Life campaign leaders, co-hosts the 40 Days for Life podcast, and edits 40 Days for Life's Day 41 magazine. He is the author of the book, This Is When We Begin to Fight, and co-author of What to Say When, the complete new guide to discussing abortion, and What to Say When 2, your proven guide in the new abortion landscape. Steve lives in Madison, Wisconsin with his wife and 5 children. Let's welcome to the program, Mr. Steve Karlen.
Hey, Lauren, thanks for having me.
So good to have you. Also, I had to ask, I thought you had 4 children, but you apparently have 5. When did this happen?
We actually, our youngest is about to turn 5. So he was born back at, you know what happened is it was December of 2019 and then COVID happened and we all got confused about a lot of things. So I think that's maybe it.
Okay. So I'm not like a totally terrible friend. It's just that you had the youngest during COVID and nobody was doing anything around that time.
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, I'm caught up now on our show. So that's great. And I joke that even though you live in Wisconsin, you secretly want to be a Texan. Is this true?
I would, if this is like the factcheck.org, I would give it like a partially true.
Okay.
I love my state. I love the Green Bay Packers, but I also have a fondness and affinity for Texas and the great people of that state.
And the Dallas Cowboys, right?
Let's move on.
I've already derailed this conversation. I'll bring us back to center here. Oh, that was a dangerous question. All right. I'm a supportive wife. My husband is obviously a Cowboys fan. I just bring him a drink now and then, right? So anyways, okay. In a few minutes, tell us, if you can do this, because Steve Karlen is Steve Karlen. Who are you, for those of who may not be acquainted with you, and what are you up to these days as the campaign director of 40 Days for Life?
Sure. Yeah, that campaign director is a title that, like, what does that actually mean? What it means is that I serve and support our 40 Days for Life leaders across the United States and Canada.
Mm,
So these folks that are going out in the spring or in the fall or both or year round, and they're out there holding peaceful prayer vigils in front of the facilities where abortions are performed and the facilities where abortions are bought and sold. We're just trying to provide them with the encouragement, the training, the knowledge that they need to do so safely, effectively, and in the confines of the law. So I do a lot of training. I do a lot of content. We've got our podcast at 40 Days for Life. It's called the 40 Days for Life podcast. Super original title. So we do a lot of that stuff, just trying to do everything that we can to equip folks to make the difference and end abortion where they live.
yeah, beautiful. Well, we know firsthand that there's so much fruit that comes from prayer and presence at an abortion or now abortion referral facility, right, in our pro-life states. 40 Days for Life is a great example of that. But the reality is we don't save them all. So I just wanted to ask you personally, how do you stay encouraged in the battle for life?
Yeah, I think that I try not to look at it as too global of a problem. It's overwhelming when you try to save the whole world and save every baby and save every mom, and you can try to end abortion on our own. I try to look at it as, I think, the way that Jesus looked at it, where certainly the Lord came and he saved the entire world, saved the human race, but he did so with a very individual approach. The woman at the well, the leper, the centurion, over and over again, it was about individuals. We're trying to save human beings, not necessarily save humanity itself. And I think when you kind of break up this crisis of abortion, which is, the leading cause of death, more children, more lives are lost to abortion worldwide every year than all other causes of death combined. That can be heavy and difficult to wrap our minds around. But when we're out there on the sidewalk, it reminds us that we don't need to save humanity. There's that woman and that baby walking into that facility. How can I love her where I'm at and where she's at? That, I think, is something that allows us to continue to serve in this mission field without getting too discouraged or overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the problem.
I love that. It actually reminds me of something that Mother Teresa once said, that she said she never worried about numbers. She just focused on loving the person, serving the person who was in front of her. And then at one point she looked back and saw this beautiful harvest, right? And so you're right. When sometimes we're tempted to be overwhelmed by the David and Goliath battle, standing in front of multi-billion-dollar Planned Parenthood and thinking, how am I ever going to shut this facility down? How am I going to make my state pro-life? How am I going to make my nation pro-life? At the end of the day, it's about focusing on that mission that's right in front of you, which is that mom, that baby, that family. I love that. I think that's a way to not get easily overwhelmed, right? So good.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because there's some things that are just beyond our capacity. And I think when we have that recognition, it's humbling to us. We don't try to go beyond what the Lord has placed in our lap. I think so often, from time to time, my wife has reminded me, Steve, you don't have to take the problems and the weight of the world on your shoulders. Just do what you've been entrusted with.
So good. Yeah, crazy. It's something that I've actually been thinking about personally, right? Somebody already saved the world, and it's surely not me. And I'm just bringing his love, his peace, his hope out to the sidewalk. That's really what it's all about. We know, Steve, that God is often working in the unseen. All you have to do is talk to a former abortion worker. I think of Kelly Lester, a former abortion worker, who said, when you guys were out on the sidewalk and you thought nothing was happening, it's actually that a lot was happening inside the facility, much less in our hearts. When we sometimes think nothing is going on, we have these God moments where we realize he was actually doing a lot behind the scenes. Do you have an example of how you've witnessed this yourself?
Well, I would say I would even go a little bit further than that. What you said is absolutely true. But I've seen, not only when we think nothing's going on, but when we think that bad things are happening, I think in many cases where we face the most adversity, the most discouragement, the most temptation to give up or to despair, I've found that those tend to be the moments where almost inevitably a big victory is just around the corner. And I think the devil is aware of that victory around the corner too, and is trying to perhaps get us to throw in the towel before that victory is won. I got involved in this pro-life movement as a 40 Days for Life leader, really trying to prevent my alma mater, the University of Wisconsin, from opening up a late-term abortion facility on campus. And I can think of one particular February day where just everything was going wrong. I was getting criticism from volunteers. Some of it was deserved, some of it was unfair. Nothing was going right. There's just a lot of spiritual warfare going on. And I remember whining a lot about it, whining to my wife, like, fine, if I'm not doing a good enough job, then maybe someone else can take it over. And we let that moment of temptation pass. And sure enough, lo and behold, it was just a few weeks later that we found out that the university had pulled the plug on this plan to do these gruesome late-term abortions. And from working with 40 Days for Life leaders across the country, I can tell you that is not an uncommon story. I almost get excited when I hear about people getting frustrated or discouraged or battling spiritual warfare, because if they can hold on a little bit longer, you often see some victories. I think in particular, I've got a 40 Days for Life campaign leader in the Southeast United States. I'm almost positive she's also involved in Sidewalk Advocates for Life. And she had really come under just some unjust criticism of her leadership. And I said, hang in there. I really believe that you're onto something. And this is the enemy trying to derail you. And sure enough, not long after that, they saved like 19 babies in relatively short period of time. So thanks be to God. I think those are the things that really help keep us going in the darker moments.
I love that. Wow. That's going to be some prayer time right there. So powerful. It's often that our next victory is right around the corner. Sometimes things have to break down before they break through, right? Oh. Our friend, former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson, tells us that at the last Planned Parenthood conference she went to before she came to our side of the fence, they told her, and I think it's worth noting that they didn't know this statistic was going to get out. They didn't know Abby was going to have this huge conversion of heart and become pro-life and start sharing this with the world, right? But they told her that when there's a peaceful, prayerful presence in front of an abortion facility, that the cancellation or no-show rate can go as high as 75%. What does that tell you? I know you guys have talked about the statistic. We talk about it all the time. What does that mean to you in 40 Days for Life?
Well, Lauren, you mentioned the article that I wrote about when we don't save any babies. And that almost becomes a little bit of a misnomer, because just because you don't know that you're saving babies doesn't mean that you aren't saving babies. I know you guys track how many confirmed saved babies you're aware of because of Sidewalk Advocates. We certainly do the same at 40 Days for Life. But you and us alike, we all specify those are just the ones that we know of. And so I am convinced that there are days where we are out there standing on the street corner, praying or doing advocacy, whatever the case might be. And the car drives by and gives you the finger, and you think, gosh, is this worth it? It's raining, or it's snowing, or it's hot, or it's cold, and the kids have soccer practice, and you need to pick up the dry cleaning, and you'd rather be doing anything other than standing out on that sidewalk with no apparent benefit. It's altogether possible, or even likely, that the woman that flipped you off was followed by a woman who was coming for an abortion until she saw you and your love and your witness, and she stayed right in that car and she kept on driving, or she had the conversation with you and you didn't know how it ended. You never got the ending to the story, but in heaven we realize all of those babies who have been saved that we were never aware of. So I think that number is one, that 75% is one that should get people out of bed in the morning, because that means that every hour you go out and you have that peaceful witness in front of an abortion facility, if every 4 children scheduled to lose their lives inside that facility, 3 of them may live to draw their first breath, may live to go to preschool, kindergarten, play little league, gymnastics lessons, learn the piano, go to high school, graduate, God willing, get married, and one day have children of their own. I think, Lauren, forgive me if I'm mistaken here, but I think a number of years ago, you did a very beautiful video about not just saving babies, but when you save a baby, you save generations. And that means that every hour that somebody goes out and participates in sidewalk advocacy or prayer, you're making an impact that will extend into the future generationally. And I think that is definitely something that gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. Oh, such a beautiful thought. Steve, one of the biggest pieces of evidence that we're having an effect is when we're out there and the abortion center escorts, these volunteers that have been trained by the abortion facility to try to thwart our outreach, our prayer, to throw us off our game and steal our peace, right? They come at us and they do all sorts of things. They might blow kazoos, or we've had people with cowbells, banging in their ears, or they start, jeering at you. We even had a abortion center escort that went to one of our priests who was participating in our program and drew like satanic symbols around his feet, right? I mean, we have story after story after story collectively together of some of the antics of the abortion facility. Of course, you got workers, you've got directors, you got all sorts of people coming out and giving our people a hard time, turning on the sprinklers, trying to get them off the public right of way. What are one or two of your, I guess you could say, most favorite antics of the pro-abortion side? And again, what does that tell you about the effectiveness of the people who are out there?
Well, one time I was out in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I was speaking at a prayer rally in front of the abortion facility, and somebody stood behind me with a sign that said, "This guy likes Nickelback," and I had never seen that one before. But
oh, you poor thing! I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Every once in a while, they're somewhat amusing. But I always tell our volunteers that we all, again, face that temptation to discouragement or wonder whether it really makes a difference. And when people who are surely busy people, I don't know a person in my life who would not describe himself or herself as a busy person. When someone who has a busy life takes the time to go out and give of their time to try to disrupt 40 Days for Life or to try to disrupt Sidewalk Advocates for Life, we may from time to time all doubt whether it makes a difference. There's one group that never, ever doubts whether our presence makes a difference, and that is the abortion supporters themselves. And who would be in better position to know? And so they come out and they kind of act like fools from time to time. I guess, my favorite story about it is a handful of different locations where I've seen Planned Parenthood tell their own supporters to get lost. This isn't helping. You're making us look bad. Women, are not coming here to get an abortion because they're pro-choice. They're just looking to get an abortion. They're not trying to make a stand for feminism or equal rights or any of those things that are in the rhetoric. And so and once or twice, even then the protesters started protesting Planned Parenthood for not being pro-choice enough. I think that's my favorite.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've been out on the public right away with Planned Parenthood. Yes. Yeah. Like you said, counter protesters. It was fun to watch them protest the prayer volunteers who they perceived were protesting the abortion business, right? Layers and layers of craziness there. But again, you're right. They wouldn't fight so hard if we weren't making a difference. And so there's been many times that I've been out on the sidewalk and I'm like, well, I got a suntan today, but the escorts are fighting so hard to ensure that I don't get literature into a woman's hands. I don't get a gift bag into her hands with a plethora of resources, right? That we're not able to refer her to the local life affirming pregnancy resource center. And again, that just tells me that they're afraid of something and really afraid of our effectiveness. I mean, this idea too of trusting women, right? Why can't we give them resources and options, hope and help? If we really trust women, why can't we trust them with all the information, all the choices? It's crazy how much they come up against us. And yeah, it shows right there that we are making a difference.
I think it's counterproductive too. I think they really shoot themselves in the foot. I don't think that this approach that they take works. And it may feel like it works to someone who's out there on the sidewalk because, okay, normally I hand out 10 bags. Today I only handed out 1. They really inhibited my efficacy. I don't think so at all, because I think that there are, again, those cars that are coming and they're looking out there and they're seeing, okay, there's pro-lifers out, then there's the pro-abortion people, and they're, it looks like a circus. Maybe sometimes they really act crazy and you get the police there. One time we had the abortion supporters there and they were so rowdy that the police came out and they brought caution tape and ran it all the way around Planned Parenthood. You might not be handing a bag to that woman because she never stopped the car to pull into that parking lot. She said, "This is crazy. I'm out of here." And she chooses life for her baby.
Right. Who wants to get their so-called health care at a circus or a shack, right? Unbelievable. Steve, a couple global questions for you. These are the types of things that we talk about when we're all hanging out at a conference after hours. We're having a drink. We pontificate about where the movement is going or the outcome of the election. So I'm going to get you on record with your thoughts here because you're always full of wisdom. Post-Roe America. I want to know if you truly ever thought that Roe would be overturned in your lifetime. And then how do you see us going from post-Roe to possibly abortion-free?
Yeah, I can't say that I was predicting that the court was going to overturn Roe in the Dobbs decision, because I kind of compare it to the Charlie Brown episodes where Lucy's always yanking the football away. And we've seen so many great opportunities and so many lost opportunities over the years that I was Thomas. I was doubting Thomas of little faith. And I thought, well, they'll come up with some kind of like split the baby, literally and
Work
figuratively
around.
compromise. And so I was delighted when they didn't just overturn Roe v. Wade, they destroyed Roe v. Wade. And so this is great news, of course. And I think, how do we get from the Dobbs decision to an abortion-free America? I think it's going to take some time for people to recalibrate, because there's always a backlash against change. If you want to look at the times when pro-choice sentiment was highest in the polls, it's when you see a pro-life president elected or when the Supreme Court decided to overturn Roe. You want to see when pro-life sentiment is highest? It's right after the Obama election. And so Americans always talk about that they want change, but they are very resistant to change. They are afraid of change. And so I think we need to get used to this change. And for decades, Planned Parenthood has said, well, if Roe is overturned, women are going to be dying in the streets. Whoopi Goldberg said that back in the 70s, before Roe, they were stepping over dying women in the public restrooms who were dying from lack of access to abortion. I think we're going to hit a point, and it hasn't quite happened yet, but I think it will happen in the years ahead, where mainstream voter looks around and says, you know what, Planned Parenthood warned of this doomsday apocalypse, women dying in the streets. It didn't happen. They warned that women were going to be getting investigated for having miscarriages. It didn't happen. All of these doomsday threats are effective when it's all hypothetical. But now we can see none of these terrible prophecies are for real. They never played out. And so I think as Americans realize that, I think that will make voting pro-life more palatable, self-identifying as pro-life more palatable. And I think we've got a real chance to see a generational and seismic tidal shift in public opinion on abortion. And we even see a little bit of it right off the bat. I think the Gallup poll, which has tracked public opinion on abortion for decades, I think that when Roe was overturned, I want to say it was like a 16-point pro-choice advantage. And within a year, that was cut in half. So the movement has already started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good thought, taking the long view on this. The election, we've got, again, the election.
Is there an election this year? That's news to me. I guess I missed that.
You've been so busy with 40 Days for Life, you didn't even know. So yeah, this is, again, the election of a lifetime, right? We might even have some more seats on the Supreme Court. And we've got, arguably, at least in one candidate, the most pro-abortion candidate that we've ever seen. We said that last time and the time before, and I didn't think it could really, get much worse, but here we are. What do we need to be doing right now to elect pro-life candidates? And then do you have a prediction on how this is all going to end up?
Well, certainly we need to vote. I think there's this effort to try to demoralize pro-life voters, and we need to make sure that we vote our consciences, vote for the most pro-life candidate in every race that's on our ballot, whether it's president or dog catcher, because tomorrow's presidential candidate is today's local race candidate. So we need to be involved up and down the ballot. And we need to have these conversations right now, because if you look at simply the top down, what is being broadcasted about abortion from media, what's being allowed to be said on social media, you would be of this mindset, perhaps, that, women are dying in the streets from lack of access to abortion. And so I think we need to be able to have that conversation with the people in our lives, whether it's the belligerent uncle talking about being pro-choice at Thanksgiving dinner, or, our loved ones, those who may be facing crisis pregnancies but haven't shared it yet and are looking for information. I think we need to be able and willing to have that conversation, even when it's uncomfortable to talk about a difficult issue. And I don't like to shy away from the hard cases, the rape, the incest, the life of the mother, the babies who are disabled. I think that we can show our compassion and our consistency toward both mom and baby when we equip ourselves to talk about the issues that maybe we're afraid of. That's why we wrote this book that's coming out, What to Say When to try to give people not so much that they need to be reminded why to be pro-life, but the confidence in having the discussion. In terms of what do I think is going to happen, who knows? It's there's a lot of twists and turns that could happen before now in the election, and with an electorate that seems to have an attention span of about 30 seconds, I don't know what will happen in between now and then. But I think what I will do is the kind of non-committal prognosticator guy approach, which is to give you a non-answer answer. And that is this: I think whoever the election is about will lose. I think Harris has sort of taken the lead at this point, because the election was about Biden. He had that disastrous debate, And everybody was talking about Biden and his cognitive abilities and all of the problems that have taken place under his administration. And so Trump was ahead in the polls. Then Harris comes in and everybody's kind of talking about what are the things that Trump is doing and saying that maybe don't reflect the best on his campaign. And so it seems to me really counterintuitive, but I think the candidate who the election is about is probably, everybody's unpopular, right? The approval ratings are always underwater. Does a guy who's -16 beat the candidate who's -20 in approval rating? I think that's what it's going to come down to, as sad as it is to say.
Yeah. Really, really good things to think about here. Yeah. Steve, this was not in the script, but as we get ready to wrap up our time together, this has been a lot of fun. We'll have to have you back on the show. I want you to talk to the person that's listening to this right now, and they are considering throwing in the towel. They feel like they're not making a difference. They feel like their partner, their prayer partner has gotten all these saves, so to speak. Someone else is considering getting into this battle. They're thinking about going to the sidewalk, but they're just really intimidated. What would you say to those people? How would you encourage them?
I've got a lot of thoughts on that, and I will try to keep them somewhat concise because this could go on. But I think, as we talked about before, just because you don't know that you are saving babies doesn't mean that you aren't. What does our Lord say? Blessed are those who have not seen, but who have believed. I am so inspired by some of these heroes who have gone out to the sidewalks and they've saved dozens of babies or hundreds of babies or thousands of babies. That is inspiring. We should all take heart because of that. I think what really inspires me more is the people who don't know of a lot of saved babies or maybe any saved babies, but they trust that the Lord is going to use them in some way that may be unseen, may be hidden to the world, but trusting the Lord that no prayer and no act of love is ever in vain. I got an email a few months ago from somebody who said, I've been going out and praying at my local abortion facility for 35 years and just saved my first baby.
Wow.
It all becomes worth it at that point, right? All of those years of heartache are worth it. You may not know of the babies we're saving, or just because you haven't saved a baby yet doesn't mean you won't save a baby. So we trust in the Lord. I think my ultimate message here is I never want to compare different ways to serve God and neighbor. There's a lot of wonderful ways. They're all valid. But there are certain ways where you go home with the warm fuzzies, right? You serve in a soup kitchen and you go home knowing that somebody had a hot meal because of what you did. Or you serve at a homeless shelter and you know that some person had a roof over her head for the first time, maybe in weeks, because of what you did. You go out to the sidewalk and there's no guarantee that you're going to know of any difference that you made. It's just an act of pure and radical faith. And I think that places this mission very, very close to the Lord's heart. And frankly, even if every abortion-bound little girl or boy is lost while we're standing out in front of that abortion facility, still not a waste of time, because that little girl or little boy probably never would have been loved by another human being on this earth, except for the fact that you were there standing in solidarity and offering help. You might be the only person that loves that child in his or her all too short lifetime on this earth. And I think that's a victory every time. So even if I have a bad day out there, I go home with a broken heart. The Lord says he doesn't want us to rend our garments. He wants us to rend our hearts, and we can allow our hearts to be broken for love of God and neighbor when we go out there, even if we don't see the results we're looking for firsthand.
So good. So good. Well, I hope that people will take your words to heart, Steve. I think it's funny. We started out this show like, what do we do when we don't save any babies? But kind of the subtext here is you probably are, and saving a lot of them, right? By God's grace. And so again, I think that that's just something to get us up every Saturday morning, every Tuesday morning, every Thursday morning, and just do what God is asking us to do and leaving the results to him. So great lesson in that. Thank you so much, Steve, for being on with us. We'll definitely have to have you back on again, and go Cowboys.
Thank you.
No, we will look forward to another discussion. Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. So good. Oh, all right. Well, I now pose the question to all of you. Do you believe in the depths of your heart that prayer changes things? I want to share a story from a time that I was praying and reaching out at an abortion facility in Dallas. This is years before I started Sidewalk Advocates for Life or even got involved with 40 Days for Life National. I was out on the sidewalk one morning, and I still remember this car pulling in and these two women in the front. And I had the thought, I need to pray over this car as this car is literally backing into a parking spot right in front of me. I was right there at the fence line, right? And I just remember, like, very quietly, without, making sure that nobody would notice, I just raised my hands in prayer. And I began to pray this beautiful prayer in my church called the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. And it's a meditation on the passion of our Lord and the power of that. So I was just quietly praying, for the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. And meanwhile, as I'm looking at this car and trying to, not draw a whole lot of attention to myself, I wanted the focus to be on prayer. I'm watching as this driver starts to pass things over to the passenger. I literally see a pillow be passed to her and then a bag of money. And I had the thought, wow, this woman probably in the passenger seat is getting ready for her abortion. In a few minutes, she's going to walk through that front door, plop down in the waiting room. They're going to call her name and they're going to take the life of her child, right? So this is all hitting me as I'm quietly praying. These two women get out and I switch modes and I began to just reach out to them and offer them life-affirming alternatives at the pregnancy center that happened to be next door. And the women actually just kind of glanced over their shoulder at me and really didn't even give me the time of the day. They just kind of made a beeline for the facility. They went right inside. And that was what I thought might be the last of them. And I literally had the thought at that moment, wow, I prayed so hard, I thought something would happen. Well, I went ahead and pivoted to another client who was coming in and, was talking to them for a little bit. And all of a sudden, my partner, my sidewalk counseling partner that morning calls out to me and he goes, "Lauren, look." And I turned around and I look at the abortion facility and I realized these two women are walking back out. And I said, "Hey, ladies, are you okay? Is there anything I can help with?" And the friend, the one that had been driving the car, looked at me and she goes, "We don't know what happened. We just walked inside and it's like we just got hit with something and she couldn't do it. We had to leave." And I literally had a moment where I was like, no kidding, it worked, right? But it, to me, was such a testament to the power of prayer because I didn't even really get a chance to talk to them. I mean, they weren't even really giving me the time of day, but I had that time of just intense prayer where I was so focused on praying over this woman, prospectively a family, praying for her life and the life of her child. And it just was so powerful to see the fruit of that right in front of my face. And I remembered looking back out to this woman that looked over to the passenger, right? And I said, "Hey, can I give you a hug?" And she was so gobsmacked, she couldn't even talk. She was like, I'm good. It was almost like she needed to get back in the car and drive home and process what had just happened. But I knew what happened. She had been met in that moment by the Holy Spirit. And it was his love, his power that turned her around. Again, what an honor to pray and to be present for that woman, for these women that morning. The scriptures tell us that with God, all things are possible. And apart from him, we can do nothing. Try that on for size. Pretty humbling. So do we pray like it? Something to think about. With that, thank you again so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Muzyka Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on Facebook Live, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next Friday.